Straight back to our top story then in business. Stephen is here with more on the French railway strike. Big disruption, of course, for passengers, Stephen. Also a big cost for the company.
And a cost that the SNCF really doesn't need. And that's because one of the biggest issues that's facing France's national rail operator is its debt pile of some 50 billion euros. And that's actually at the centre of the reforms that are at issue by those who were on strike. Now, it's estimated this walkout is going to cost the SNCF between 12 and 20 million euros per day. Most of that money will go in refunds to passengers who've already booked, but there's also lost ticket sales and those who decide not to book train tickets in the future because they don't think it's a reliable service. Now, the company has been hurt in the past financially by strikes. In 2016, 23 days of industrial action cost the SNCF almost 250 million euros. In 2014, 10 days of strikes cost it around 160 million. Now, disruption of this scale also has a knock-on effect for the wider economy in France. It's difficult to estimate exactly what that will be. General strikes over 10 days back in 2007 knocked 0.1% off French growth, while the massive stoppages in 1995 had double that effect on the headline figures for French growth. So 0.1% in 2007 and 1995, it was 0.2% of GDP wiped off in a quarter. That doesn't sound like a lot, and that's because these figures can be balanced out over time. Companies make up losses for days that they've lost as a result of the disruption. But one industry that's particularly worried about this is the tourism industry in France, as Selena Sykes now reports.
The port town of Saint-Malo, far more quiet than usual. The only visitors in sight at this historic fort this Easter weekend were those who came by car.
We live next to Rennes, so we drove.
We're finishing our trip in Saint-Malo before going back to Picardy.
We did the whole trip by car, like true backpackers.
Many tourists cancelled their long weekend breaks in fear of not being able to get a train home. This hotel's revenues took a massive hit, losing €3,000 in just 2 days.
Most people who had reserved rooms for the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and were supposed to come by train, ended up cancelling.
In the town centre, restaurants have had a busy weekend, but are still worried about future strikes.
A lot of the strikes are taking place during the weekend. As a tourist destination, weekends are obviously our busiest time, so it is concerning.
The ongoing action isn't just affecting domestic tourism in France. This week's two-day walkout has forced Eurostar to cancel 29 trains on Tuesday and Wednesday between Paris, London, Lille and Brussels.
Well, meanwhile, it's been another rough day on the stock markets. Wall Street stumbling back into correction territory on Monday. That's when you have a 10% fall from recent highs. The tech-heavy Nasdaq index closed down 2.7% at the end of trading today. Falls too on the Dow Jones and on the S&P 500 as well. In fact, the Nasdaq has wiped out all of its gains so far this year. If you take a look at how it compares to the start of a second quarter of the year, it is the worst since 1929, if you're looking for something to be optimistic about this morning. Technology shares in focus in trading again on Monday on Wall Street. Amazon down by over 5%. That's after tweets from President Trump over the weekend targeting the online retail giant, fears of greater regulation on there in the eyes of investors there. Facebook again seeing falls down almost 3%. And Intel, the chip maker too, their shares plunging by 6%. That was after a report that Apple would start making its own chips for its iPhones, which of course would have a huge impact on Intel's business. Aside from the tech worries, though, the other big issue dominating trading in Asia today is continued fears over trade. Will those tariffs laid out by China on US goods spark retaliation from the United States? We've got the Asian markets down across the board. Shanghai Composite down by over 1% in trading. The Nikkei in Tokyo finishing down by around 0.5% as well. Well, another company that's suffering from this shattered confidence in the tech industry is the electric car maker Tesla. Its shares were down by another 5% on Wall Street on Monday, the latest in a series of falls. That's after the American road safety regulator said that it was unhappy with the company revealing that its autopilot system had been activated before a crash involving one of its cars last month. Now, Tesla released the vehicle logs from the incident, which suggested the driver did have time to take back control of the car and react before the crash happened. The National Transportation Safety Board expressing displeasure that details related to its investigation were released by the company, this adding to general fears over the state of Tesla's business, coming at a time when there's increased worries over how they're going to meet production targets for its Model 3 cars and also the size of its debt. Let's just take a look at how Tesla's shares have performed over the past couple of weeks. On March 12th, they peaked at over $345, down to $252 at the end of trading yesterday. That's more than a quarter wiped off the value of the company in just 3 weeks. Well, finally, for me, the British passport-making company De La Rue is to appeal a decision by the British government to make its post-Brexit documents in France. De La Rue says it believes the bid for its bid for that contract, which is worth hundreds of millions of euros, was the most technically secure. The UK awarded the contract for the new blue passports to the Franco-Dutch firm Gemalto, the decision provoking strong reactions in Britain, with one petition against the move gathering more than 270,000 signatures. It was a pretty embarrassing decision for the British when it happened, but now De La Rue are trying to do their best to overturn it.
Yeah, OK, we shall see what happens, as long as they're blue.
As long as they're blue, that's the most important thing.
Very important, apparently, what colour they are as well. Stephen with business on France 24.